Hey, Watchers. Today's episode takes us to the California coast for a battle to the death against a coven of rock star looking vampires. Directed by young up and coming Joel Schumacher, this film brought the cool factor to the vampire genre. So sharpen those stakes and fill those squirt guns with holy water, because it's time for 1987's horror comedy, The Lost Boys. Welcome to the Midnight Watch Podcast, the show where we discuss classic, cult, and modern classic movies.
We're your hosts, Jeremy and Josh Baruto, and we review movies that are at least 10 years old. Fair warning, we're big on spoilers here, straight from the get-go.
We rate these movies in 4 categories. Number 1, the level of impact and success it had when it was released. Number 2, how relevant is it today? Number 3, our own personal enjoyment of this movie. And number 4, is it a midnight watch?
What is a midnight watch? It's a film which completely captures your attention, drawing you in. No matter what time or what part you start watching the movie, you have to finish it.
Cry, little sister. That song. I'm not gonna lie. I've been playing the soundtrack to this movie at work like all day. I'm sure.
Seriously.
I'm sure my coworkers hate me. Well, no, it's kind of funny. Okay, so you know the song "I Still Believe." Yeah. Anyways, my boss actually, Dallas, we were always joking around where it's like he's falling behind in his work, but he's got to finish on time. So I was like, Dallas, this is your theme song. I still believe. So, anyways,
Nice.
Yeah. This is The Lost Boys, directed by Joel Schumacher, written by Jeffrey Boehm, Janice Fisher, James Jeremias. I think that's how you say it, Jeremias. Score was by Thomas Newton. And the budget is $8.5 million. The box office was $32.2 million. That's a nice return right there.
Oh yeah,
made about 3 times what they put in. I wonder how much they advertised this movie. It seems like a more of a lower budget movie. Well, I don't know. No, never mind. 87. So it was a decent budget movie. It wasn't lower, but it was a decent budget movie.
I mean, Schumacher had some good movies, before this. So I'm sure it wasn't like they must not have felt like they were risking a whole lot by having him do it. So it wasn't like they gave him a tiny budget. Right. Is all I'm saying. Right.
Which I noticed too, at first I didn't like it, but then I got used to it and I ended up liking it. The fact that they never show the vampires flying, it's always from the camera angle and people reacting to it. I was like, that saves a lot of money and a lot of like dumb effects if they couldn't pull it off. And so that actually does kind of make it a little bit better.
It's just smart filmmaking, like you said, in balancing the budget.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. This movie, it is starring Jason Patric, Corey Haim, Diane Wiest, Bernard Hughes, Edward Herrmann, Kifer Sutherland, Jamie Gertz, Corey Feldman, Billy Wirth, Brooke McCarter, and introducing the one and only Alex Winter, who I don't think has any lines in this movie. If he did, he's like withering on the ground dying. He's like, excellent.
Right. No, I don't. He might have one throwaway line.
Oh, no. He said good night, Michael, or something like that when he jumps off the bridge. Says, sorry, Alex.
But basically, he had to wait for Bill and Ted before we could hear that awesome voice.
Technically, I guess he was actually in another movie before this, but this is the movie that says introducing Alex Winter. And they had they wanted him to shorten it. Like apparently his name's Alexander Winter. And they were like, you got to shorten your name because it's too long for the prompt or something like that. Anyways.
Oh, that's funny.
I have a lot to say about this movie. And I know you do because you picked out this movie this time.
I did, man.
You've been dropping this one for a long time. You were like, about Lost Boys. And I was like, nah. And you're like, yeah. I was like,
I know.
Nah.
And now you're like third or fourth time around.
Right. Now you're like,
finally wore you down.
You're like, I still believe. So,
dude, that's the thing. Like this soundtrack is pretty awesome, like all the way through. And there's which I don't know why they didn't include it on the soundtrack, but they don't have Walk This Way during the campfire massacre scene from I keep wanting to say AC/DC, not AC, Aerosmith. Thank you.
Yeah.
And Run DMC. And that was,
I don't think Run DMC was on that one. I think that Run DMC
wasn't that version.
I think that was the original version. because I think it's from Toys in the Attic.
Okay, but
Run
either
DMC
way,
at
they
90s.
didn't include that song on the soundtrack. Like it's not officially part of it, even though it's in the movie. And I think there's 2 other songs also that weren't included. But that aside, it's a good soundtrack. Though I do have one little bone to pick with it. They showcase like a lot of punk rock culture in this movie, and the vampires themselves looking very rock and roll,
right?
Punk rock, kind of vibe. But there's not one punk song on this album, and there was plenty of punk music around that they could have used. Yeah, and I was just a little bummed about that. I never really put that together beforehand, but as I'm watching it for the review, I was just like, man, it's got such a punk vibe. Yeah, and they didn't go there. But I think for me, seeing the oiled up All-American saxophone beefcake we know as Tim Capello rocking the hip thrust, that was enough punk rock for me. I was like, who is this guy? and I looked it up because I was like, is that an actor? Is that the real actual musician? It's the real musician. And I didn't even know this, but he does the saxophone solo on the one song that Gunship does. The new song came out, like Darkest of Days or something like that. I saw that. Yeah. I was going to listen to it and I didn't get around to it, but I saw he played with Gunship. Oh, that's a straight up. Right. They totally tagged him because of his 80s, influence. And I was like, oh, that's sick. Like that makes that song even cooler. Cause like Gunship is legit. But yeah, I was just like, oh man, I still believe. So let's see. When was the first time that you watched this movie? I think it was at work with my old movie club, and I'd known about it for a long time. And I think I'd seen bits and pieces on TV, but like I don't know. And just some of the kind of iconic scenes from that movie, I think I'd just seen, him flipping through the channels or something, but nothing solid until I sat and watched it at work. And it grabbed me. I think I was always intimidated. Well, when I was younger, like we've all, keep discussing, wasn't really that into horror movies. So I was probably a little intimidated to watch it at the time. But when I finally did, I was pleasantly surprised. That's interesting. I'm trying to remember when I saw it. I think I had to have watched it. I think it was 2006 though, when I started watching a bunch of movies from the library. And I think this was just clustered in it. And I was watching a bunch of horror movies. So this movie I thought was supposed to be like this classic vampire film. And when I watched it, I was like, this is weak sauce. Like there's nothing in this movie. And so I was bored out of my mind, didn't like it. And that's one reason I kind of was pushing back when you were saying that you wanted to review it. And I was like, yeah, I don't know. I'm like, I'd rather be folding laundry. But anyways, when we rewatched it, and I'm glad you did, because now I have a lot to say about this. And cool. I'll just say my opinion has changed. Well, so, there you have it. Yeah. I know that's how I felt about Godzilla when we did that one. But it's fun. It's fun to review movies, to go back, because the first time you watch a movie, you could love it, and then you watch it again, and you're like, actually, it wasn't that good, or vice versa. So right. I think that's happened to us recently. I can't remember which one we did, but I think that also happened then, where we thought we were going to enjoy it as much as we remembered enjoying it. Right. But that's just growth as a human. I hope so. Or old age. Right. One of the two. You ready for a synopsis? Dude, I am so ready for that synopsis. Thank you. Pumped. Wikipedia, donate, family and friends, donate to Wikipedia. Right. We should donate to Wikipedia. We should, because if they go down, we're screwed. If they go down, we're going to have to hire a writer, somebody who actually knows what they're doing. This is going to be bad. I know. Can't have that. Okay, Here we go. Michael Emerson and his younger brother, Sam, travel with their recently divorced mother, Lucy, to the small beach town of Santa Carla, California, to live with her eccentric father, who is referred to simply as Grandpa. Michael and Sam begin hanging out at the boardwalk, which is plastered with flyers of missing people, while Lucy gets a job at a video store run by the local bachelor, Max. Michael becomes fascinated by Star, a young woman he spots on the boardwalk, though she seems to be in a relationship with the mysterious David, the leader of a young biker gang. In a local comic book store, Sam meets brothers Edgar and Alan Frog, a pair of self-proclaimed vampire hunters who give him horror comics to teach him about the threat they claim has infiltrated the town. Michael finally talks to Star and is approached by David, who goads him into following them by motorcycle along the beach until they reach a dangerous cliff, which Michael almost goes over. At the gang's hideout, which is a sunken luxury hotel beneath the cliff, David initiates Michael into the group. Star warns Michael not to drink from an offered bottle, telling him it's blood, but Michael ignores her advice. Later on, David and the others, including Michael, head to a railroad bridge where they hang off the edge over a foggy gorge. One by one, they fall, Michael falling after them. Michael wakes up at home the next day, unaware of how he got there. His eyes are sensitive to sunlight, and he develops a sudden thirst for blood, which leads him to impulsively attacking Sam. Sam's dog, Nanook, retaliates, causing Sam to realize that Michael is turning into a vampire by his brother's semi-transparent reflection. Sam is initially terrified, but Michael convinces him that he is not yet a vampire and that he desperately needs his help. Michael begins to develop supernatural powers and asks Star for help, but has sex with her shortly afterwards. Sam deduces that just a little rant.
Help. No, let's just have sex. What are you, James Bond?
Right.
Gender swap. Okay.
Right. They make it so casual here in this description. After the deed is done, Sam deduces that Michael has not yet killed anyone, so he is a half vampire, and his condition can be reversed upon the death of the head vampire. Sam and the Frog Brothers test whether Max is the head vampire during a date with Lucy, but Max passes every test, and the boys decide to focus on David. To provoke him into killing, David takes Michael to stalk a group of beach goers and instigates a feeding frenzy. Horrified, Michael escapes and returns home to Sam. Star then arrives and reveals herself as a half vampire who is looking to be cured. It emerges that David had intended for Michael to be Star's first kill, sealing her fate as a vampire. The next day, a weakening Michael leads Sam and the Frog Brothers to the gang's lair. They impale one of the vampires, Marco, with a stake, awakening David and the two others, but the boys escape, rescuing Star and Laddie, a half vampire child and Star's companion. That evening, while Lucy is on a date with Max, the teens arm themselves with holy water-filled water guns, a longbow, and stakes, barricading themselves in the house. When night falls, David's gang attacks the house. The Frog Brothers and Nanook manage to kill Paul by pushing him into a bathtub filled with garlic and holy water, dissolving him to the bone. Sam is attacked by Dwayne, another vampire, before he shoots an arrow through his heart and into the stereo behind him, electrocuting him and causing parts of his body to explode. Michael is then attacked by David, forcing him to use his vampire powers. He manages to overpower David, and he impales him on a set of antlers. However, Michael, Star, and Laddie do not transform back to normal as they had hoped. Lucy then returns home with Max, who is revealed to be the head vampire. He informs the boys that to invite a vampire into one's house renders one powerless over said vampire, leaving them unable to exploit any weaknesses that the vampire has while there, explaining why their earlier assumption appeared to be incorrect. Max reveals he had instructed David to turn Sam and Michael into vampires so that Lucy could not refuse to be transformed herself, as his objective had been to get Lucy to be a mother for his lost boys. As Max pulls Lucy to him, preparing to transform her, he is killed when Grandpa crashes his Jeep through the wall of the house and impales Max on a wooden fence post, causing him to explode. Michael, Star, and Laddie then return to normal. Amongst this carnage and debris, Grandpa casually retrieves a drink from the refrigerator and declares, "One thing about living in Santa Carla I could never stomach, all the damn vampires."
I actually like that line.
Just a great ending to the movie.
It was actually pretty fun ending. Yeah, I was like, okay, that was pretty cool.
It was awesome. And that quote was just, well, which this movie is chock full of really good quotes.
Yeah, it does.
Very, very quotable. And that one right there was just like the best one of the whole movie. Just boom, the ending.
Right. So we're researching this movie. So the reason that David doesn't disappear or anything happens, he just kind of reverts back to his normal self or whatever, and he's just impaled on there, is he wasn't actually supposed to be dead. So that way they could have a sequel, which Joel Schumacher wanted to direct that one. And that was going to be called The Lost Girls. It was going to be like a girl biker game, which sounds better than the sequels that actually came out like 30 years later.
Right. I've seen some of I think Lost Tribe, and it was, I wasn't digging it. I mean, I don't know. It might be worth a look see.
I don't know. I wasn't a fan of the first movie, so I was like, why am I going to watch the second? Why would you watch the second?
Right. And it is, I mean, Joel Schumacher hated the sequels that they ended up putting out because it went against everything he wanted for there to be in a sequel. And it just doesn't make sense because it's just not as fun because the Frog Brothers, Sam, the two Coreys, famous Coreys, they were adults then. It just wasn't as cool as when they were kids, and they kind of keep with the Lost Boys. I mean, they're not boys anymore. They're a bunch of old dudes now.
Right. Which is kind of sad. Corey Haim passed away in 2010 from pneumonia, but I think he got pneumonia because he was a pill addict. Like I was reading into that. He had like hundreds of scripts of medications that he had been like doctor shopping and all kinds of stuff. And then I know that the other Corey Feldman, like he was a drug addict for a while too. Like he actually was on cocaine when they were filming this movie. And then he showed up to work and he couldn't function. So he got fired. And then he came back the next day with like profusely apologizing and was like, no, I'll be like 100% legit. And then he was like 100% dialed in for the rest of the movie or the rest of the film. So that's pretty intense.
I didn't look to see how old he was in this one. I know he's a little bit older than Corey Haim,
he's like 15, dude. Like he started.
Wow. So he was doing coke when
he was young. Yeah. I feel sorry for him because like I watched the Crystal Lake Memories, like the making of Friday the 13th movies, and he narrates it, and he started to look like Mick Jagger, like after you use a ton of drugs, and then when you're older, then you just kind of start getting shriveled up. Apparently though, he had a lot of bad stuff happen to him, both the Coreys, and so he's kind of starting to speak out about that, like Me Too movement.
Yeah, the sexual abuse and stuff, right?
I believe so. I haven't looked into it yet, but I think that's what it was. Yeah, which is really sad.
I know it's just too bad that he might have even been not forced, but maybe pressured into it by adults to be getting into that
to the drugs and stuff. Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me. Yeah, he was already kind of up and coming. He was in the Goonies. He was in Friday the 13th Part 4. So actually, Richard Donner, the director of the Goonies, was going to direct this, which is why he produced it. And then they was actually originally written to be younger. So all the boys were going to be like 12 and 13. And then that's why it's called The Lost Boys. A lot more heavily influenced by Peter Pan. And then once Schumacher came in, he wanted to jazz it up and had everybody's ages get older.
Right.
And it was really his idea to have it be like the young, sexy vampires, like the forever young, forever like cool, and which kicked off all of the vampire stuff that we have now. So
total groundbreaking film, just, inadvertently.
This movie feels like an hour and a half long music video to me, though. It doesn't have a lot of substance. And there's just a lot of scenes where it's just like, this is a music video that is just telling a simple story. And
because that's the thing. Like maybe it's a wasted scene in that there's nothing happening, or a wasted shot, but at the same time, it's all beautiful. Like it all looks cool. Yeah. Very stylized. I mean, every shot seems to be stylized for the most part.
I think instead of a story, this movie has more of a feeling that people like, and it kind of captures it. And so
absolutely,
the first part of this movie was just like, I really kind of got pulled into it and was like, oh, I'm actually really enjoying this. I didn't realize that Jason Patrick was like the main guy in the movie. I thought I'd only see him as an adult, so I didn't realize, that was Jason Patrick. So I really enjoyed him in this. I really liked Corey Haim, to be honest. I thought he was really good.
Oh yeah. Well, it's funny because when I think of this movie, I think of him. I think of and I think of the Frog Brothers, and in my mind it's like, Jason Patrick. That's all right.
Yeah, Jason Patrick.
Okay, the older brother. I always kind of think of him as a secondary character, even though I have it's backwards. I mean, or it's not backwards. I have it backwards in how I think it. And I think
he's the biggest guy on the
bill
picture. Yeah.
Right. But I think why it is. And it's funny that, you brought up that this was originally written to be styled after the Goonies because it was going to have, the Goonies director doing it. And I'm watching this movie and I'm like, man, this really feels like the Goonies or Monster Squad or just something kind of from that era. And it has that vibe, and it's got these, younger teen kids, just barely teens, almost junior hires kind of feeling. And, so I think that's why that's the big, strongest feeling I get out of this movie is that kind of Goonies feel to it, even though, which speaking of that, as far as like why it has an R rating, really all the blood and gore, and maybe I can't remember if there's I don't think there's much strong language in it, but really as far as the blood,
there's really any language in it at all. Yeah.
But the blood and gore is in the last 20 minutes of the movie. It's in the showdown.
And then also the beach massacre. There's kind of a little bit then. Oh
yeah, there's a little bit there, but it's not. To me, when I got to that scene, I'm like, well, this isn't barely enough to make it R. Mm-hmm. The final sequence, the big battle, definitely makes it R. Yeah. And it's funny because to me, I sort of wish that. Well, I know they didn't really have a good PG-13 rating back then, but what we would consider.
If this is 87, the PG-13 rating came out in 89, so it would have been PG.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
And I feel like they easily could have made this movie PG-13 and appealed to teenagers and to, kids that could watch something that was a little bit more mature, but wasn't, straight up rated R.
Right. I don't know, though. I feel like it wouldn't have had such of the cool factor. It's rated R. So you're like, oh, I want to go see this cool, awesome, restricted movie that has Corey Feldman from the Goonies. Because honestly, the only thing I remembered from this movie was Kifer Sutherland and Corey Feldman. Yeah. And then, it's kind of cool. So this movie actually started off several friendships in real life. Corey Haim and Corey Feldman became really good friends from this. This was the first movie they starred in together, and they made 8 other movies together as the two Coreys.
Right.
And then Jason Patric and Kifer Sutherland became lifelong friends. They're still good friends. And I was like, that's pretty cool.
Awesome.
So I always enjoy that when something like that happens. Let's see here. Oh, dude, the thing that impresses me sort of is this movie was filmed in only 3 weeks. So there's not a lot of story. There's a lot of setup shots. So, and crowd reactions and stuff. So I think it would actually it makes sense that it could be shot in 3 weeks, but still 3 weeks is 3 weeks. That's
insane. Now, granted, it really was mostly shot in one location, which is very helpful too, being Santa Cruz. And I think that's the other reason why I feel like a connection to this, just because I love Santa Cruz and Monterey and just that kind of middle part of California. I have a lot of good memories of that area, and it just beach culture in that, I don't know, just California beach culture in general. I mean, that's really big for our family.
Yeah.
We grew up, going to the beach all the time.
Right. For real.
That just, and it's also something that cracked me up at the start of this movie. The brothers are, complaining to their mom as they're driving into town about having to move to this new town, move to this new place. Why can't we just go back to Phoenix? And in my mind, I'm just like, are you kidding me?
Phoenix.
This incredible, little beach town that's got a boardwalk and roller coaster. And obviously, I don't know, maybe not to everyone else in America, but to me, it was obviously like, man, that sure looks like Santa Cruz. Even when I was younger.
Right. I mean, you're right. They filmed it at
that would have been a
Cruz.
dream come true. As far as moving anywhere, I would have loved to move to the beach like that. So it just kind of cracked me up that these kids are
they're complaining. Yeah.
Right. Getting pissy about it.
I think the first day though that they're there, when they go to the beach concert and he first sees Star and stuff like that. I think that's when they're just like, oh, nope, we're here. We're here. Right. And I think it's freaking hilarious. Sam's walking around in a kimono. And I was just like, that's literally 80s.
Right.
I was like, Duran, there we go.
Right.
I have a fair amount of problems with this movie, but I feel like it's unfair to talk about them because this is the first sexy vampire movie. So I see so many things they could have done to really branch this out. And there's plot holes and just the things that I'm like, oh, they could have totally done this or done that. And then I'm like, well, it was the first one. So I can't throw shade at it for that. And
the thing is that being exactly what you said, if they would have done Joel Schumacher's sequel, which he wanted to do The Lost Girls, which would have featured, these sexy teen girl biker gang.
Girl version. Yeah.
I think that would have been a really cool spinoff or sequel to it and kind of kept the same idea going without having to, I don't know, rehash too much of the first one. I guess they would have kept, I guess the idea was that David, Kifer Sutherland's character, he would have not really died because they don't necessarily show him die in the movie. I guess that's the whole thing is that they would have.
Yeah.
he's impaled, but they could have, easily made him come back.
Well, they play
he
fast. They really play fast and loose with the vampire rules in this movie.
Dude, so much.
Because I'm like, they killed the master, so I'm like, technically, all the other vampires should have just died anyways.
Right, including David. That should have killed him.
Right.
For sure.
But they're playing fast and loose with this. Like, I don't get the whole Daywalker thing in this, and it doesn't.
Which is cool. I mean, he's definitely, you've got Blade. There's definitely other Daywalker types out there.
Yeah.
As far as vampires go, I mean, there's different franchises play with the rules differently.
Right.
And you're right. This one doesn't. It's kind of jumps all over the place. I guess they could have, if they would have done a true sequel and maybe really done a legit franchise out of this. Maybe they could have really established some rules for what this particular universe of vampires, what their rules were going to be. Right.
And I had to kind of abandon my view of vampires like halfway through this because they do whatever they want to do with the vampire lore. And I actually kind of respect that because it's so fresh, like such a fresh idea. Because like now it's not. Now it's like beaten to death. But at the time it was before that. It was just Dracula and Nosferatu. And
very serious, very, very
dark and gothic.
I was gonna say boring, but no, you hit it. Dark and gothic, very one style.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess you had what was that soap opera type one that Tim Burton made a movie of, Dark Shadows. So you had kind of a funny take on it, but that was still times too. The Count, though, like that was still kind of the Count. I mean, the movie, the Tim Burton movie is a lot more funny than the TV show was. Right. I know the show was a bit more serious, but anyways, yeah, it definitely, it's just the thing that I still love about this movie. Cause as I'm watching it, this is probably my third time watching it. Oh yeah. And I'm just like, man, this movie's just fun. It's just cool. I don't really have a lot to say about it because like you said, there's not a lot there, but it just has such a cool vibe. The music was on point and it's just fun to watch. So you can kind of, like you said, kind of be forgiving. I mean, unless you just want to really pick it apart. You can do that with any movie, but this one is just, it's a fun ride. And I guess that's why it brought out the kid in me, which is where I was like, man, it could have easily been a PG-13 movie. But again, that's unfair because they didn't have that in between rating to play with. Right. And for sure, if you're going to market it to teens, teenagers are going to want to go see the rated R movie over the PG-13 movie, even though there's a lot of good PG-13 movies out there, but I've fallen into that too sometimes where I don't know really what a movie is, but because of that rating, I'll maybe pass on it. Cause I'm thinking, they're going to cut corners. And I didn't watch 2001 A Space Odyssey forever because it was rated G. And then I finally watched it and I was like, oh, I like this movie. This is a cool movie. So I totally feel you. Yeah, no, this, with The Lost Boys, I don't know. I don't like a lot of Joel Schumacher's movies, to be honest. So when I was going back to watch this, I was like, it's a Schumacher flick. I really don't like most of his movies, excluding like Batman Forever. I do like that movie. Right. But I don't know that it has anything to do with him, though. It's just. Well, he's a huge Batman fan, which is funny. That's true. That's true, though. And so he did that and Batman and Robin, which I actually never finished Batman and Robin. I couldn't finish that movie. I'm so surprised I couldn't finish that movie because I love terrible films. And that movie's like intentionally campy. Loved those movies. Well, the Tim Burton ones and then those two. Yeah. I have seen those movies a lot, especially, when we were dating and. Right. So Jim, they actually. I want to show the girls them. Yes, definitely. They actually were tracking to see if they were going to have Jim Carrey in this movie because he was in the movie Once Bitten before this. And so that would have been interesting. And but then with Kifer Sutherland, he was actually reluctant to take the role until he found out that In Excess was going to be on the soundtrack, and he was a big fan. It turns out Joel Schumacher actually directed a couple music videos for In Excess. Right. So did you hear why he did that? No, why? So apparently they didn't have enough money in the budget to get a lot of those bands on the soundtrack. And so he personally promised some of them, I'll direct a music video for you for free if you'll be on the soundtrack. Really? That's so interesting because I know they wrote a song for it, but that's pretty cool.
So yeah, Kifer Sutherland decided to be on it, and I think, which is kind of funny, he annoys the crap out of me in this movie, and I feel so bad saying that because I'm like, David's such a douche. Like, I don't know, it's his character. He does a great job. Kifer Sutherland does a great job, but his character, I'm just like, oh my gosh, and like. The word that's spoken the most out of the entire movie is Michael. They say Michael 118 times in this movie.
Is that a real number?
I'm not kidding. That's the real number. 118 times. They say it more than there are minutes in this movie.
Oh my gosh. But that makes sense because I can totally hear everybody's voice, saying
right. They're
that
like
name.
Michael. Yeah. Michael.
But it's funny though, because like for such a douchey character that Kifer plays, I mean, you think he is the movie in a way. I mean,
he really is.
He's one of the main faces you think of in this movie. And he is a cool character for really not having a lot of lines. It's just attitude. That's just like some serious swagger going on.
He's got a presence, and you're right. He is the face of this movie. He really is. When you think of this movie, you think of Kifer Sutherland. You're just like, yeah, that was him. The only thing I remember from this movie the first time though was when they were like on the bridge and they're jumping off the bridge. I just remember that was weird. And I remember there wasn't a lot of violence in it. And that's why I didn't like it at first, because I was like weak sauce, Right. But yeah, no, it's interesting. Watching it a second time though has really changed my opinion on it. And then once I started researching it and seeing like how original this movie was at the time, makes me like it more, to be honest. Cause I was just like, oh, okay. That makes a lot of sense then, like why there's not a lot of story. Cause I was like, dude, they could do so much more with the story. And one thing that's bothering me, and like, maybe I think I got this figured out though, is so Max goes in there, he gets invited, he goes in. Does that mean that all the other vampires can go in now? Because Max gets invited because he's the master? Because I was thinking, I think it's just Max. But then, because also too, like they don't invite Star in and she comes in anyways. And then they don't invite Dwayne in. He comes through the fireplace at the end. He just shows up inside. And I'm like, wait a minute. That's not vampire lore. But then again, like I said, they play fast and loose with vampire lore in this. It's not Salem's Lot. It's not Dracula. So
no, I think you're probably absolutely right. I mean, maybe there's some reasoning out there. I tried to do a little bit of research just on some articles about the movie. And I didn't see anything pertaining to that. So I would love to hear some opinions from some other like super hardcore vampire film people as far as maybe there were loopholes for how that could work, or if it's just purely you get so caught up in the action, you don't realize, wait a minute. Right. I mean, we've talked about this before. You and I can be total suckers for just going along for the ride. Oh, this is amazing. And then you realize later that, that didn't make sense. But
it's funny though, why this pulled me out of the movie several times, things like that. Cause you're right. Most of the time I'm like, I'm just going with it. Like, I don't really care. Is it fun? It's fun. And it's like, there's certain things that just kept pulling me out. Like when they were like, Max is the main bad guy. I was like, well, he was at the restaurant and it was like the sun was going down, but like the sun wasn't down yet. And so anyways, small things like that just kind of bothered me, but I do want to watch it again because Aubrey wants to watch it. And so I was like, I think I might watch it again. I really have fallen in love with the soundtrack. The soundtrack is just so much fun.
Sometimes that really makes the movie. Like the movie I mean, I don't know how many movies we've watched that, it was a great movie, but you can't remember what the soundtrack was. Right. So that I don't think it really helped it at that point. But then there's other movies that, obviously there's the ones where it's like, great movie, great soundtrack. It's all tens. It's like, oh brother, where art thou? Right. And then there's other movies where you're like, great soundtrack, subpar movie or terrible movie, but great soundtrack because it's just a great playlist basically. But this one, it works with the feel of the movie. It works with the characters. Like you said, it's a giant music video. It's like 8 music videos, strung into and they made them. It's put it together as a movie. So that is probably one of the reasons why it's so cool and has, like you said earlier, such a good feel, good vibe that people are attracted to. And then you can forgive the vampire flaw. Because honestly, like talking to other people that are really into horror, I mean, I only ever hear that this is a cool movie to them and not, but the vampire, rules are terrible. I've actually, you're kind of the first one to really bring that up to me, but that doesn't mean it's not a thing for sure. Right. But it's very interesting how you say that. I don't know if people really care about it though, because it's clearly
doesn't really care about the vampire lore too much. So it's not trying to hide that. It's just kind of like, this is the new cool, vampire thing. And so, yeah, like I don't think they should remake this movie because it's such an 80s staple. Like I said, it's more of a feeling. But if they did remake it, they could do so much more with the plot and the story and clearly define different things. Because there's a theory, big fan theory, that the grandpa is actually half vampire, and so he's drink all those root beers actually isn't beer. It's animal blood from him doing
all the animals, the taxidermy. Right. So, that's a cool theory.
Right. Which I'm like, it's interesting. I don't think that's the case, but I just think I think it's actually funny. I think he's just a retired hippie and he's just like, vampires are just part of life. This is part of what I deal with after I came back from Nam. So
I do got to say, if they did remake this, and I also for other movies from whenever back in time, I think it would be cool if they did remake it to still remake it in the 80s, have a killer 80s soundtrack, keep it there, because that's still the nostalgia, I think, is what also makes it cool. I mean, obviously that was the year you were born and I was 7 years old. So that doesn't.
So yeah, one other thing about Corey Feldman is that Joel Schumacher wanted him to resemble action stars. So he was like, watch a bunch of Sylvester Stallone movies and watch Chuck Norris movies and get into the character of the action star. So he takes himself super seriously in the movie, even though he's a joke. But
that's what's so fun about it, because you can see a 15-year-old, taking himself and his ideas, very seriously.
Right.
Man, we got a real problem here. We're professionals, call us if that whole thing.
Exactly. Yeah. Read it. It's a manual for life.
Hey, and a quick shout out to that beautiful husky in the movie, right?
Nanook of the North. Yeah. That's what I'm talking about.
That was a gorgeous dog. And it had a cool, protecting his master scene as well.
Right. Oh, I gotta say, like, I thought it was so funny in this movie though, where he's just like the sex scene where he's just like, "What's wrong with me, Star?" And she's like, "I can't tell you." And then like they go, and then like they slowly lay down, and then like that song kicks in really intense. Right. Like, oh, like it's about to be like an intense sex scene, and then it's just like, nope, let's just move on.
Yep, and then
nothing, and then I just thought that was hilarious. I was impressed. Changing the subject a little bit. When they get attacked, they attack the guys at the beach. There's one scene of Kifer Sutherland like biting this guy's head and like blood splurts up. And I'm just like, that's freaking violent looking. Like, it was pretty cool.
That's really the only gory part in that little sequence there. There's a lot of people getting dragged and screamed and flying around, but that's the one part where you're kind of like, oh, I can see where maybe this might be rated R. But honestly, up until that point, and the fact that they totally bypass anything graphic in the sex scene. I mean, it was implied. It
was implied. Yeah, but there's not nothing. There's really until like the bodies explode at the end when the vampires die. Yeah. And then, not really.
Dude, the blood shooting up from all the sinks and toilets and everything. It's such a Evil Dead thing. It was awesome. And I don't know if that was a tribute to that or they just decided to do it, but that was straight up.
I think they just decided like, what kind of crazy stuff can we do? Yeah. Because like Corey Feldman, when he's like, they explode, they can do this, however he says it in order, they die in that same order, actually.
Right.
And then they added glitter to the blood to make it sparkly, which I was like, that's an interesting idea. But
right. And then you have, Twilight years later where you get sparkly vampires.
Sparkly and the vampires. Absolutely. Yeah. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I want to talk about before we roll into our final verdicts, but I think I'm good. How about yourself?
I just love how Grandpa, his character was, you just think he's this eccentric old coot, just this nutty kind of throwaway character. And then right towards the end, you see him, sharpening these fence posts into stakes, but you're kind of like, that's odd. Those look like stakes for vampires, but they're freaking huge. Like, what's he doing? And it's just kind of in that little montage. And then it's gone. And the next thing you know, he's crashing through the house, with it strapped to the front of his truck and impales, the van. But anyways, it was cool. And then you're just like, it clicks and you're like, whoa, Grandpa knows. And then he makes that one statement when they first meet him and they're all, is this a dangerous town? And he's like, I forget how he says it exactly, but he kind of casually skirts around it saying like, there's a bad vibe here,
Right. Oh, I think it's funny. I wrote this down. I said, nothing says hello like pretending to stroke out when your relatives show up. I just, he's just laying on the porch and they're like, oh, you okay, Grandpa?
That's some dark humor right
I
there.
know. And he's like, everything's fine. And I'm just like, dude, if that was me, I would have been like, are you Grandpa's dead? Like,
right.
It's ours. No, I'm just kidding.
Not happy.
Yeah. I just like, that's dark though. I was like, that's the darkest scene in the movie. But anyway.
Yeah.
All right. So let's see. 1987. Do you think that that it hit its mark when it came out?
Absolutely. I think it was definitely obviously made its money back, 3 times over. So that's a home run, but I do think it had very, decently favorable reviews from the critics and was kind of a, hey, real quick. Did you ever see that Black Mirror? Do you ever watch Black Mirror on Netflix? So in the most recent season, there's that one where the 2 girls, they have like a neuro link or whatever, and they can visit each other in like any time period.
I haven't seen that. I've seen a lot of the earlier ones from like the first 3 seasons.
Well, anyways, they go back to the 80s, and it's that whole Santa Carlo, whatever.
Oh, that's cool.
Santa Cruz, but it's totally an homage to the Lost Boys and that whole, sequence and everything. But anyways,
that's legit.
I think it's just, I only say that because that movie did well then. It's not just a cult classic now. I think it was kind of the, a little bit of a movie of a generation, you could say.
No, I totally agree. I think it definitely caught a vibe very clearly.
Yeah.
It reminded me of Easy Rider in the case of like, there's not a lot going on in that movie, but it's like the movie of a generation, like you said, like it's a biker film. Most of the plot in Easy Rider was lost in the deleted scenes. That movie was like an extra hour long, I guess. And then there's like anyways. So it just reminded me of Easy Rider, where it's literally like a giant long music video and they're playing all their songs that they like.
Right. But for people in the 70s, that's like an iconic movie to them. So anyways, I feel like this was iconic for that late 80s time, time period, whatever.
Right.
But I give it an A. I think it's an A for relevance when it came out and impact and whatnot.
I give it an A as well. 100%. I got to give it to Joel Schumacher. I think he definitely had lightning in a bottle on this one. Like, I'm not really a fan of his stuff, but he definitely had a really good idea. And I think it presented really well. And he had a good cast and crew around him to make this.
Right. Yeah. I saw that the cinematographer that he had, I guess, had been in a lot of other well-known movies previously. Right. I think he worked on The Godfather and worked with Scorsese, I think, and a bunch of other, really big actors and directors. Yeah. Had, tried to direct himself, didn't do so well, and stepped back behind the camera. And this was his first movie back doing it. And he did really well.
That's interesting. I didn't know that. I think it's interesting how Diane Weist, I think I'm saying her name right. Mm-hmm. It's funny how like Joel Schumacher had to really like pull to get other people in this movie, like the younger actors and stuff. They like Jason Patrick like didn't really want to be in it until he finally got convinced him to be in it. And it's so funny that then like he goes and asks Diane Weist, who just came off of winning an Academy Award for the last movie that she was in. And she didn't even hesitate. She's like, yeah, I'll totally be in it. And it's like, dang, that's awesome. She reminded me a lot of Dee Wallace, which I thought was pretty cool. Mm-hmm. Let's see. Is it still relevant today?
That one, I don't know. As far as pop culture goes, maybe not. As far as how it impacted film today, like we were talking about with the vampire genre, definitely. But I don't know. I'm still not sure because I feel like unless you're a horror fan, I don't know. Because I mean, like say you were a Twilight fan, 10 years ago, I don't know that you would have been like, oh, and I love the Lost Boys.
Right. No,
so I don't know. I landed on a C+, but I was really kind of unsure how to rate that.
Yeah. It is definitely a classic, and it is one of those movies where it definitely inspired a whole genre. But you're right. Like the people that are fans of the stuff now may not know about that movie. I was talking to different people at work and I was like, yeah, we're going to review The Lost Boys. And they're like, the what? And I had to tell them, I was like, yeah, it's an 80s movies with vampires. And they're like, oh, okay. And I was just kind of like, these are like younger people. So like people that are older, like they were like, oh yeah, Lost Boys, I know that movie. I think you're right. It was the generational movie. So it being a classic that influenced it, like, yes, but is at the same time though, they didn't get proper sequels though. The sequels were terrible films, and they were playing just mainly off of the name,
trying to appeal just to the fan base and not to any kind of broader or new audience, you know.
Right. I got to give it a C as well. I think I'd want to rate it higher, but it's just not in the limelight as much as like other movies. It is more of a generational. It is an 80s classic for sure.
Yeah.
It's not
right.
Like people that like 80s movies are like, oh yeah, I know the Lost Boys.
Oh yeah, exactly. So, and if you're a horror fan, then you're gonna know this movie as well. But as far as, you know, the broader pop culture, it's just, you know, like you said, it's a classic.
Right. Okay. And personal enjoyment, Josh, how did you enjoy this?
I gave it a B. I really like it. Yeah.
Nice. I initially went from giving this an F because I just really didn't enjoy it the first time I watched it.
Yeah.
I really kind of got sucked into it. And so then I have to say though, it raised it up to, I'm going to give it a C. Like, it's a solid flick.
Nice.
I'm going to enjoy it when I see it again. I'm not going to like stop to watch it or whatever. So that kind of goes right into, is it a midnight watch? For me, it's not a midnight watch. What about you?
It is for me though. It's definitely, it is. It kind of surprised me. I wasn't sure how I was going to feel about it in that category as I was watching it. And the more I'm watching it, I'm like, man, I just love all the vibe on this movie. Like, turn it on at any point, and I'm just kind of sucked in. So,
oh man,
I think it's definitely, according to our definition of a midnight watch, I think it definitely works for me.
That's awesome. So one thing this movie reminded me of, like when they're on the train tracks and then they're like, see you later, Michael. And they fall down and he climbs down. And then they're like, fall, Michael, just fall. It totally reminded me of that little like YouTube cartoon from years ago, like Charlie the Unicorn. I don't remember if you saw that. Where
that sounds so familiar.
It's like this one of the first YouTube videos where these two little like characters are telling Charlie the Unicorn to like do stuff with him. They're like, come with us, Charlie, fly with us, fly, Charlie, fly, Charlie, fly. And he's like, oh, okay, I'm flying. Okay, I'll try. And then like he gets knocked out and he wakes up and he's like, that wasn't too bad. That was actually pretty. Oh crap, they took my kidneys. And like that's the end of that skit. So it just reminded me of that so much, where they were just like, fall, Michael, fall. That's another thing, though, real quick. One last thing with the plot, though. So they want Star to kill Michael, but Max wants David to turn Michael so that way he can get with Michael's mom. That doesn't make sense. But I guess there was a little bit of pushback between David and Max because when they
when they show up at the video store early in the movie and he's like, I told you not to come in here.
I told you, boys. Yeah. So I guess that might be maybe
a little bit of a power struggle. So we'll go with that.
That sounds good to me. Oh yeah. And apparently Kifer Sutherland, he actually broke his wrist when he was doing a wheelie on the.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And
dude, they are not messing around on those dirt bikes, man. When they're just ripping up and down the beach, they're going balls out.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah, exactly.
And then apparently though, like Santa Cruz at first didn't want them to call the movie Santa Cruz because of the one line where they're like, it's the murder capital of the world. And it was called that when the 70s, when all the serial killers were doing that stuff. But so they had to rename the spot. But now though, it's like a Santa Cruz's movie. Like they play that movie almost every summer for everybody to watch. And they're
super proud of it. They own it. Yeah.
Right. Which is, like, that's cool. Because I know they said a couple years before Sudden Impact came out and the showdown to that movie is on the boardwalk. And like the people that were on the board of the town, like did not know about that. So it's a pretty violent scene. So they're like, no, that's not the boardwalk. Boardwalk's supposed to have people coming in, not people getting killed. But Lost Boys
taken out.
Right. But Lost Boys now, though, you realize like, no, it's supposed to be fun and all that good stuff.
Right. So, and the good guys win. So it's definitely, there's not a negative spin on the movie as far as the town itself. It's definitely good triumphs over evil. And I'm glad they ended up embracing it. Cause like I said earlier, I love Santa Cruz and that general area of California. And that movie's just got it all.
Absolutely. No, I definitely agree. Well, I think that about wraps it up for today's episode. If you guys want to check out this movie, I watched it on Tubi.
Same.
Yes.
We love Tubi.
We do. Special thanks to our sound producer, Jake Colvin. If you had as much fun as we did on this episode, we would love it if you guys shared it with your family, friends, and anyone that you think that would like it.
Yes, and please subscribe, rate, review our podcast. It can be found on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and just about every other platform out there. Also, we'd love it if you visit our Instagram or our Facebook page and join in on the conversation of what is your midnight watch. We'd love for any comments about any of the posts we make talking about movies or your thoughts and whatnot. We'd love it. We have a hashtag going, What's Your Midnight Watch? And you can also directly reach us at the Midnight Watch Podcast at gmail.com.
That's right. You guys, thank you so much. You have a fantastic week. And as always, keep up the watch.